Hey guys, it's your boy MKS with part 2 of I forgot even what I called this, but a sort of Q&A about Indigenous people from across the Americas and like what research I would love to do, and I hope to ask questions to find out information. And I'd love to have a team of people who go and travel to like reservations and see how we can help Indigenous people from across the Americas and things like that, and like how perhaps Indigenous people from across the Americas could have their own centres where tourists come and learn about their culture and their history and things like that. But yeah, as ever, I'd love to hear what you think about this video, and I hope especially to hear from Indigenous people from across the Americas, especially from all over the Americas, preferably, if at all possible. Like if there are people, Indigenous people from Brazil and Canada and places like that who have access to YouTube. I'd love to hear from your comments anyway, Native Americans and whoever wants to comment, and whatever you want to comment and whatever your opinions are. Basically, as I say, freedom of speech and freedom of expression, as I often say. But yeah, so sorry if I'm waffling. But yeah, I'll try and keep it to questions, because last time I talked about some more of my ideas, but I suppose these are kind of ideas about what sort of questions I could ask and things like that. But anyway, so as I say, please check out part 1 if you haven't done so, and look out for part 3 when I hope to make it later on. And here goes. Number 11, I would love to know about any Native American inventors or investors or people. I've heard of a few Native Americans who have set their own business, or well, I've not heard any names of people who have done that, but I know there are like sort of projects that help, like with taxes and things like that for Indigenous. Like to me, one of the things I would love for Indigenous people from across the Americas to be tax exempt. So I'd love to hear what people think about that. Do you agree with that idea or not? I suppose trying to frame that as a question. In other words, do you think that Indigenous people from across the Americas should be tax exempt, and stroke, or do you think they should get state or even state aid or funding, or even funding from like money raised from the lottery or things like that? I'd also love for like 10% of all the politicians, political like councillors and people like that to be Indigenous people, and even maybe even see an Indigenous leader from some countries within the Americas one fine day. Number 12, I'd love to hear what people think are the best ways to empower Indigenous people from the Americas. Yeah, what sort of ways you think they could be empowered, and if you're an Indigenous person from the Americas, like what ways would you like to be empowered, or what sort of things would you like to see happen? Number 13, what could be the Indigenous or native or whatever word you want to use, I use those terms interchangeably, version of like scary YouTube content creators like Nuke's Top 5 or Blastphamous HD or people like that. Yeah, so, and what sort of stories could they tell, and like could they make like list videos of scary videos and stories and things like that? And yeah, I'd love to hear what Indigenous people from the Americas think about that idea. And yeah, so I hope there'll be in the future an Indigenous person of a version of like Nuke's Top 5 and Blastphamous HD and people like that, and like doing stories about skinwalkers and Wendigos and other urban legends and creepypastas, where they could talk through those sort of stories. They might be passed down. Number 14, I'd love to hear like solutions to what sort of solutions there could be for challenges facing Indigenous people like on reservations and things like that. Number 15, again, if you're a person of Indigenous descent in the Americas, I'd love to hear like what your goals are, aspirations, that sort of thing, and what help you think you could get to, or what help you would like to work on those sorts of things. And number 16, I would love to know like yeah, from Indigenous people, like what life is like on the reservations or things like that. I know there are some YouTube videos on those sorts of things, but I think it'd be great to hear like more from Indigenous people themselves, like what life is like and how it could improve, or things like that. Just generally hear from Indigenous people, like their stories and information like that. Number 17, I think again in the future it would be great to hear more Indigenous people making their own stories, Indigenous people from the Americas making their own YouTube videos with stories of yeah, whatever's in their imagination. Like some of them could be old stories, some of them could be new. Yeah, so yeah, I'd love to see what they could create. And I'm trying to phrase that as a question, but yeah. So if you're an Indigenous person from the Americas, like what sort of stories could you tell, or would you be interested in making your own channels talking about like things? They could be like scary stories or cheery stories or all sorts of things like that. Or generally, what sort of things would you love to cover on your channel and things like that? Number 18, what if Indigenous people from the Americas like all had their own YouTube channels and supported each other's channels and TikToks and accounts and things like that, and social media generally? Like what sort of yeah, I think it'd be quite interesting to see how many people are there in. That's another question I could probably find out and research, like how many Indigenous people, how many people of Indigenous descent, even mixed Indigenous descent, are there from the Americas, and like if they support each other's projects and things like that, including businesses or things like that, or support each other in politics and united together and work together across all of the Americas, like how far, what could they achieve? And I'm sure they could achieve quite a lot. Number 19, I'd also love to know if there are any projects that support Indigenous people from across the Americas in areas like software development or STEM generally. And number 20, I'd also love to know what younger people can learn from the older generations. Like what could they learn about their own culture, or what could they learn about wisdom generally, or what could the world learn from Indigenous people of the Americas' wisdom and things like that. So again, I'd love to hear what you think about this video. I'm sorry I didn't quite phrase them as questions as I planned to do. But yeah, hope you're doing well wherever you are, and I'd love to hear from you or read from your comments. I'm out. Peace and love.